And the names of our participants, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm Lee Heiss, lawyer, guardian ad litem.
There we go. Don't worry, it's muted here. It's muted. Okay, so
Thank you for your
it's muted in places where I take out the kids' names.
patience, Your Honor. I apologize for being late. Ms. Daja Thomas, counsel for the department.
Eva Copus, child welfare specialist with MDHHS.
We were right on time as far as I'm concerned. We were all getting ready to start with this. Thanks for worrying about.
Joseph Miller.
Thank you.
Michael Brooks, I'm the attorney for Joseph Miller.
Michael McFarland, representing Mother.
Stephanie Varga Avalos.
Right. Midnight.
Thank you, Your Honor. I visited with the children in person. Generally, the littles really enjoy their visits with Mother. We're streaming. KM is also visiting with Mother. She is also very active in sports and school, and the good grades these girls get, and they're so socially right in the thick of things at school. So many times our kids aren't really in the main social life at school, but these guys really enjoy a lot about school. So I visited them at their placement home, which you'll remember is the father of the younger two. The older two consider that person, Mr. Avalos is here today too, they consider him their father figure. Now, there's been some visiting and back and forth, and I'm eager to hear where Mr. Miller is on his request for visiting. At this point, I don't know how he's feeling. We've had some email exchanges and things going around, so the oldest child, ZM, is still progressing in her recovery, not interested in visiting at this point. It's founded on things that I think we all support her on as she progresses. Mother has been doing lots of her case service well. She engaged with me, gave me receipts and things that I had been concerned about, really gathering evidence rather than just having conversations, which are helpful too. So I have received and reviewed the court report with the trauma assessments. I think that'll conclude all the children's interests are being met at the placement home. I'm just going to remind the court that there isn't any income coming into that home. This is not a paid placement, and this agency is working with them. I'm on their back all the time. The placement has a plan for employment. There's also not a driver's license in that home. Another recent development is that there is a divorce now filed between the mother and father, and it's really hard to find resources for the father of the younger two to find a resource to answer a divorce. So that is the status of things, but you know, this home is really, these girls are very bonded to each other, and they're on time, they're getting good on time to school, getting good grades. KM is a wrestler, although you would think that she doesn't look as tough as she is. I pity the fool that tries to take her on, because she's tough and she has lots of interest. She's got a dog. The dog is well behaved as the children. It's shocking. And that dog is really bonded with KM, and it's really nice to see. The house is clean. They were having steak and potatoes the day I was there. So lots of strengths in this family. We look forward to Mom continuing in services, continuing to progress. Thank you.
Ms. Thomas.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Copus, can you please be sworn in?
Come on up, Ms. Copus.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
You do.
Good afternoon, Ms. Copus. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you.
Could you give us your full name for the record?
Yes, ma'am. It's Eva Copus.
Okay. And I have in my, I'm sorry for the interruption, Ms. Thomas, but I have in my notes from last time that we had did we have a different caseworker? When did you take over, Ms. Copus?
I've had this case for the entirety of it.
Oh.
Maybe that was our CPS investigator.
Yeah, I was gonna say, at the last hearing, you might have had the CPS investigator rather than Ms. Copus.
Thank you.
Ms. Copus, today you prepared a court report, correct?
Yes.
And your cover page indicates several exhibits. In addition to the court report, there is the case service plans for both mother and father. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then the Catherine Cobb therapy letter, the Catherine Cobb therapeutic treatment goals, the certificate of completion for financial stability. There's the forensic fluids results for Ms. Varga Avalos, the ACPC letter for Ms. Avalos,
Yes.
CPC parenting education, I believe, for letter for Ms. Avalos,
Yes.
the medication log for Ms. Avalos, the orchard parent education reports,
Yes.
and then the CTEC trauma assessments for Z, G, and A. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are there any updates or modifications that need to be made to those documents or any other documents that you've received since submitting this report?
I did receive copies today of mother's psychological evaluation. I did bring copies of those to distribute, should the parties wish to read them. The recommendations in there requested 2 books. I'm sorry, one was from her trauma assessment, one was from psychological, and the update to the psychological, so those books have been ordered from them.
Okay. And then the case service plan. I believe the one that you included was not signed.
I did not have an opportunity to meet with parents face to face. Did have several conversations with mom, and then I met with her prior to court. So what is in your hand is mom's signed copy that we reviewed it, and that she agreed to the plan.
Do you have a signed copy of the case service plan for Mr. Miller at this time?
I do not. The last time I saw Mr. Miller face to face, it did not have it ready.
Okay.
And then we have had very little conversation and communication since then.
Okay. Yeah, may I approach? Okay. Or the witness. Ms. Copas, I just handed you a document. Can you briefly summarize what I just handed you?
This is the case service plan that outlines what we are requesting for Stephanie Varga Avalos, and includes what the department will do to help success with reunification and what the expectations are for mother.
Okay. And that is a signed copy, correct?
Yes, it is. Mother signed it and we reviewed it today.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, if I may ask the court to receive that particular case service plan for Ms. Avalos as it is the signed.
Objections?
None. I have no objection.
Thank you, Deputy.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Sounds
much.
like mother's doing great.
Is received.
Ms. Copas, at this time, is there still substantial risk of harm to the children if they were to return to either parent's care or custody today?
There is.
And can you just briefly summarize what that risk of harm is?
There is a risk of harm of additional or further abuse and neglect. Mother has worked on her service plan and has made substantial progress with services, but the barriers are still there. The mental health component is still there. And so it is appropriate to continue with the services to rectify those barriers. Specifically, like I said, mental health, maintaining medication. We've only had a small period review of watching mom on her medication. She did recently have a medication change as well. It does appear to be a positive change. I have seen a lot of change in how she communicates and mood regulation. So I do anticipate seeing some further progress with that, but we definitely would need more time to watch that as well. We do have an issue with one of the children, ZM, not visiting. And so I think that also presents a barrier for the remainder of the case as well, because we have a child who's not visiting.
And when you say not visiting, who is Z not visiting with?
She's not visiting with either parent.
Okay. And what is the risk of harm as it relates to reunification with Mr. Miller?
There is a risk of harm of abuse and neglect if the children were to be in Mr. Miller's care based on my observations of his mental health, his temperament, and his mood regulation. I have concerns that he would not adequately be able to parent the girls. Also, ZM is not visiting with him as well.
And the barriers that you mentioned to reunification, what has the department done to help assist in rectifying or addressing those barriers?
For both parents?
Yes.
So for mother, we've kind of split services half and half. She has sought out a lot of additional resources that the department sees benefit in. But we referred her for a psychological, which was she successfully completed. She's doing the mental health services. She actually does 2 mental health services. She does one at Catherine Cobb's, which is to address domestic violence. And then she does a secondary one through ACPC for the schizophrenia. She's in parenting education, and then right now she got employment, and she's on a waiting list for housing.
And as relates to father?
We referred him to therapeutic visitation, and we advised him to seek out the community mental health. He did find Easter Seals in his area that could provide those services to him as well. He was referred for a psychological, but he called no show for that service.
And at this time, do you believe that it is appropriate to continue towards the goal of reunification for the children?
Do you think the goal of reunification is appropriate? And I would recommend the parenting be therapeutic for dad and remain supervised for mom.
And the duration and frequency of those parenting times, can you just briefly summarize what they are and if you're recommending any change to that?
So mother is only visiting once a week right now through Orchards. We do have a family team meeting scheduled for Thursday, 14th, to specifically talk about expanding visitation. Really was looking for that psychological to make sure that mom was stable and watching her behavior, and we do see some stability. So the plan for that meeting is to talk about expanding visitation. One of the things that we had briefly talked about was KM, not intentionally, but the littles take up a lot of time, and so we had talked about getting her some additional time with mom alone. So we have lots of things to explore at that meeting.
And then for father?
For father, I would actually recommend that his visitation be only therapeutic based on my observations in his last parenting time.
Can you briefly, I know that this is in your report, but can you just briefly highlight or summarize for the court why you have that recommendation?
During our last visitation, I'm back up, I apologize. During the visitation, Cam has been very good about asking questions. I've seen her for some years, and so she has quite a lot of questions. She's been told some things by her stepdad and some things by her mom, and so she has sought clarification on those. She has met with resistance, and he openly told her that she was being brainwashed, that her stepdad was a liar. And during our last visit, he told her 3 times that she could see him when she turned 18 because he was done defending himself.
And was the individual there, I guess, was this in a therapeutic setting or just supervised with you?
This is supervised by myself.
Okay, and so that's why you're requesting for a more restrictive component through this therapeutic, correct?
Yes.
Is there anything else you would like to bring to the court's attention from the reports or the exhibits that you've provided?
I had got photos of the judge. I wasn't sure how to submit that, if that was even allowed. I apologize.
Okay. And your may approach witness? Okay. Ms. Copus, I'm handing you a document that appears to be a photo. Can you please describe what that photo is?
It is a Christmas photo of GA, AA, and VM with mother sitting on Santa's lap.
And are you aware of who took that photo?
I took that photo yesterday at the Catherine Cobb's Christmas party that I attended with mother.
Okay. And you brought it today for the court?
I simply thought the court would enjoy a photo of the family.
Okay. And so for another purpose, just to show that they're able to have time together, and this is how they're all looking and doing.
I feel that sometimes we get lost in the paperwork, and it's helpful to always just have a reminder or a photo of that we're dealing with people.
Okay, thank you. Your Honor, if the court would accept this in addition to the court report, and I would propose it as Petitioner's Exhibit 15, I suppose, for today's hearing.
I have no objection.
No objection.
I object.
We
And
love
then
this
Supposed
attorney.
photo. I mean, what, we're trying to show these kids have been raised normally, and now everybody's happy and hunky-dory? They're not raised normally. The courts have said they're not raised normally. That photo does not include my client in it,
Yeah.
so it's not an intact family photo.
Yeah.
It's propaganda to
No.
pursue a goal that I submit is inappropriate. I object.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I can appreciate your frustrations. However, I do think that it is important to document the progress that each parent makes. And including a photograph of visitation, I think, is not prejudicial, but merely goes to support the progress that Mr. McFarland's client is making towards reunification. And it is simply a photograph. I will not take it as definitive evidence that all of the issues have been rectified. You can trust me on that piece. So
I do.
I will accept that with those comments. So we will pass that along and we'll accept that as 15.
Ms. Copus, I have a couple of questions. Well, just, I guess, one, the trauma assessments, were you able to review those with the parents?
I have not had an opportunity to review them with Mr. Miller. We were waiting, KM's is not back. I did reach out to Catholic Charities because the holidays, they don't anticipate it being back for another week or so. Mother and I have briefly reviewed in passing in conversation, but we haven't sit down and formally went through them. She does know that there was a book recommended for her to read, so that has been ordered, and obviously if father is interested, that will be ordered for him as well.
And are there any other recommendations that the trauma assessments noted that the department can help with, like referrals to certain types of therapies or anything like that?
The biggest thing that came out of the trauma assessments for ZM was that she needed to be in control of her visitation with both parents. There aren't any really additional resources that we aren't already offering that we could offer, but it did really hone in on her unwillingness to visit and how that needs to be a choice, and that needs to be in a therapeutic setting.
And overall, would you say that the parents are in, how would you generally see the parents' compliance with and benefit from their case service plan during this review period?
Mother is overall in partial compliance. There are areas that are in full compliance, such as employment, and then we have things that she's still working on. But overall, she is continuing to make progress towards goals. And I know that we're making progress. It's all nice, but she has worked hard, and she does still have a long road. I did have an opportunity to speak with both her therapists, and she's working on them. She's putting in the hard work. In regards to father, I would say poor compliance. I've seen little effort, and I've seen a lot of blame being tossed around as opposed to taking accountability and participating in services.
Is there anything else you'd like to say for the record today?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions of Ms. Copus, and would move to admit the court report with the attachments.
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
Thank you. They are received. Cross-examination, Mr. McFarland?
Yes, I know you said that mom is in partial compliance. Is perhaps the component you're looking for, if I understand you correctly, do you want to make sure that her medication, she's taking them? Is that correct?
Let me make sure that she's taking them and that she's benefiting from them.
That's my second question I was
Yeah,
gonna
because
ask.
we've had some little issues but mom's been very upfront. Like there was a time when the medication wasn't working and she went right to me and the service provider was like, this is not working. So we're just looking to make sure the medication is going to continue working and show benefit.
And that is why you're asking for supervised parenting time, is my understanding, correct?
Yes.
So we usually have 90 days between review hearings.
Yes.
Do you think that perhaps if she shows compliance into this next 90 days, you would like the ability to consider unsupervised parenting time?
I would take the ability to allow that. That would be appropriate to have at the discretion of the department. 90 days is a long time.
And it seems that we're trying to have normalcy for the children, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I know that we're in an age where there's instant texting and PMs and all the other stuff that we use to communicate. And mom would like to know if perhaps there's some way that we could integrate in her texting with the kids, maybe even with a copy to you, just so it's appropriate. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Mother has recently started letter writing. My concern with things like text messages is that they can be deleted. And I don't get to see the full conversation. I would think that supervised phone calls and letters to start off would be more appropriate. But I'm also willing, especially since we have a family team meeting coming up, to expand all of those and discuss all of those. Because text messaging would have to have specific rules, times, just same as phone calls. Can't have her texting at like 11 o'clock at night, things of that nature.
So it sounds as though you're willing to explore that and to discuss that. You're not closing that option. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes.
Okay. There is one child that does not wish to visit, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and the goal is reunification, correct?
Yes.
How do we accomplish reunification? What are we doing to accomplish reunification with a child that right now does not wish to visit?
So she is in therapy with more counseling, and I pick up KM for her visits with Dad, and the Orchards worker picks all the girls up besides DM for their visit. So we're providing transportation, and we ask at every visit. I've literally been like, you need to come out of bed and talk to me for a minute because you need to tell me if you're going to visit mom or dad. And she's been adamant. Her trauma assessment says that we need to give her that time, that therapy. She has only recently started therapy, and so I'm hopeful that we will see more therapeutic process in the next 90 days.
And are there plans to integrate mom into this therapy somehow, because mom is a component?
It was not the plan within the next 90 days because I did not know where we would be, but it was always a component that we would at some point get to.
Nothing further, thank you.
Mr. Brooks?
What is therapeutic visitation entail?
Therapeutic visitation would be with a therapist. So they can break down things that are happening in that moment to discuss feelings and emotions and process what's happening in that moment to decide how things are going to move forward.
Is that the environment that my client was allowed by this court's orders to visit his daughters?
He was ordered, my understanding from the last order was that we were ordered to start visits immediately within 5 days, and that they had to encompass at some point therapeutic visitation. Their visitation hasn't begun yet. My understanding is because we're still working out the details, and Mr. Miller canceled his appointment with Renee and needs to reschedule.
I've asked him where I'm trying to understand therapeutic visitation. So he has had visitation, but not what you would describe as therapeutic visitation. Is that right?
He hasn't had it with a therapist, no.
Were you present at these visitations?
I was.
Who was there?
Myself. It was KM, myself, and Mr. Miller.
No one else?
At his last visit, he did not tell me. He just showed up with his daughter. His adult daughter.
Was there any foster parent there?
The foster parent would be the stepdad.
The father, the stepdad?
No, he's never. I transport. I pick her up from the house. We get a good about 25 minutes to talk. Then she did her visit, and then I drive her back.
A moment, Your Honor. She says he wasn't there. Pause. Did the child, KM, excuse me, ask your dad a series of questions?
So she's been asking him a series of questions. Specifically, she was asking questions about a suicide attempt that Mr. Miller had attempted in 2011.
How did she know about that?
That information was given to her by stepdad.
I see. Keep going. What other questions did she ask?
So it actually went over 2 visits. There was one visit approximately around the 14th that she asked him about the situation in which he denied it. And then the second visit around the 22nd, she had actually found paperwork and had read the paperwork and had confronted him on it.
About what?
About why he had not been truthful with her about the suicide attempt. That's all
Why
she
he had
wanted.
not been truthful about what?
The suicide attempt.
Information her stepdad has provided her.
Yes.
Otherwise, how would she know how would she have an opinion whether it was truthful or not?
Well, Mr. Avalos has been quite open and honest with the girls. I have also been quite open and honest with the girls. She asked me similar questions about her dad's cast in the car, which I tried to answer as honestly as possible, what I did or did not know. She's trying to get to know him, and she wants answers to these specific questions.
She want to know the answers to anything positive about her dad?
No.
Did anybody provide her any information that was positive about her dad?
I encouraged the conversation to go in different directions on multiple times, and when he had moments where he was unable to ask her questions, I would interject of like something as simple as, what's your favorite color? What are you doing for fun? I would encourage him to talk to her about wrestling. That is her biggest thing. And instead, it always ended up back into, oh, so your sister's not visiting? Why isn't your sister visiting? And, or he would ask her questions about like, did she have questions about him? Instead of making it about her.
Well, in effect, he is a stranger to her, isn't he?
Yes.
So isn't it logical he would ask if she has questions about him?
Not more than he would ask questions of her.
And you would encourage this open communication about the stepdad and stepmom's attitudes towards Mr. Miller, feeding this to this child?
I'm not sure, I mean.
Well, did she find out that he is accused of committing suicide or attempting it? And isn't that appropriate at all?
I think it's appropriate in the sense that she was seeking information and that's the information that she was given. Specifically because we had previously talked about dad having mental health, and she wanted to know to what extent that was. I don't know to which conversation that happened between her and stepdad that would have allowed like what specifically transpired. But the attitude, Mr. Avalos has not expressed an attitude towards Mr. Miller and to me. And Ms. Avalos has not said anything to the children since the case has come into care about Mr. Miller.
Has anybody told these kids that the mother was found to have committed fraud in the Ohio courts when she got the kids' names changed? Has anybody told them that?
Yes, and Mr. Miller also told her that.
I didn't ask about him. Do you know whether the stepfather and mother did that?
Well, I had that conversation with them, so I cannot tell you whether stepdad and mom had that conversation. I know that I've had that conversation with them because I had to inform them that their last name was legally Miller.
That's not what I asked you. Has anybody told them that the mother was found by the courts in Ohio to have committed fraud in the way she got it done?
I don't know in that wording. I know that I've told them that mom was in the wrong. I did not say that she was fraudulent. I told her that she was in the wrong and that she was not within her means to do so.
If we're encouraging full disclosure, isn't that part of full disclosure?
No, I'm going to object to the cited question for relevance for purposes of the review, which is simply to understand the parents' compliance with and benefit from services and how they're progressing towards reunification.
I'm showing that this witness has a very strong bias, one against my client, and two in favor of the current situation. And it's coming out in the questions that I'm asking. And I think you need to know that.
Your point is made, Mr. Brooks, and I look forward to the updates on why your client has not engaged in the services that he was recommended. So that's.
I'm going to call him.
Good. All right, so I'm gonna sustain the objection just because I think you've already made your point. And that's gonna be
You've expressed the opinion that my client, in your opinion, has mental issues. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
What is your training, educational background?
A bachelor's degree in human services, but my statement and opinion on his mental health comes from the fact that he himself informed me that he received Social Security benefits for anxiety and depression. And my understanding is that since that diagnosis and him receiving that Social Security benefit, there has been no follow-up with mental health providers.
How many questions, if you can recall, did KM ask her father about his past?
Your Honor, I object. Aren't we still on that same line of questioning that was objected to by the attorney for the agency?
I want to know what this visitation consisted of. If it's nothing but a grilling fed through the kid by the step-parents, I want to know it.
Your Honor, I think the request is for all therapeutic going forward, so we wouldn't be in that setting again if they agreed to only have a therapist in the room who's got that special training and can help with these questions.
well, and I think also, frankly, I don't really want to get into a play-by-play about what happened during visitation. I think it goes beyond what we're here to talk about today. And there's only been, I think, 4 visits between your client and this child. So the
Which
value
we do
of this,
appreciate, by the way.
well, the value of this line of questioning, I think, is not as important as some of the others. So if you could move along, I would appreciate it.
Would you agree with me that therapeutic visitation would take a different track than what's been done so far?
That would be the hope, yes.
Would you be, excuse me, would you be there for that?
Would I be supervising for the therapeutic?
Yes.
No, that would only be through Ms. Moore.
All right. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Heiss?
The comment allegedly made by Mr. Miller, see you when you're 18, whatever that situation was, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Did you observe that statement?
Yes.
Did the child see that statement?
He said it directly to her face.
And did he pound the table when he said that?
Not to my recall, but I was focusing at that moment of removing Cam from the situation.
So would you agree that there may be a conversation with Mr. Avalos regarding telling children the truth as developmentally appropriate?
I'd be more than happy to have that conversation with them.
Just for, to support his parenting?
Yes.
Now, I don't see in the case service plan that we're drug screening mother, are we?
We are not drug screening mother. She did volunteer to complete one. There was, I don't know if it's necessarily an allegation. It was said that she might be misusing medication. And so I had asked her randomly during a family team meeting if she would complete a drug screen, and she did.
And the results were positive for opiates and hydrocodone, correct?
Yes, which she is prescribed.
Where is she prescribed that?
I apologize, I don't have that with me. She provided me her bed list before, and she has provided me with like the screenshots from like the pharmacy. I'm just not, I apologize.
That's okay. Can we put that on the agenda for the family team meeting to look at the levels, if they're appropriate, and what those prescriptions are for?
Yes.
Is she still on those prescriptions?
Yes. Yes.
Do you know if Adrian's psychotherapy counseling, you know what agency I mean, the one she's counseling with, do you know if they're aware that she's taking those?
I am not aware. It was not a specific thing that her therapist and I talked about, but I can add that to our agenda moving forward.
Thank you, as well as THC.
Yes.
Was she positive for THC too?
Yes.
Okay, I just scrolled past that. Are we sure that at Adrian's psychotherapy that she's getting more than just med reviews?
She actually gets her med reviews from the community mental health. through a different doctor. So she's
And-
actually not getting medication from Adrian.
Okay, is she getting counseling at Adrian's Psychotherapy?
Yes.
And do they have a copy, or will they have a copy of her psychological evaluation?
I talked to mom today about that. She does intend to give her a copy. I did tell her I would be following up as well to make sure that that happens.
Okay.
Actually, she's gonna get 2 copies, one for both therapists.
So, ZM is 15 years old, correct? And she is choosing to do her counseling and her therapy, but choosing not to visit with mom or her biological dad at this time, correct?
Correct.
Has she made a request from you about her permanence? Did she have a question for you about guardianship?
KM actually had a question about alternatives. And so I had answered her about that there are alternatives, but that the main goal is reunification. And I had walked her through like adoption, was it APLA, relatives, and then guardianship. We've gone through a little bit. Based on their age, we had a brief conversation about it, yes.
Okay, you said maybe in the next 90 days, you'd be open to exploring unsupervised visits for mother.
Yeah.
Would that be with the younger 2 or with all 4?
Honestly, it would depend on where the girls are all at in therapy and where mom's at and what she can handle.
Okay. So when you said that sometimes KM, when she's visiting mom and the 2 youngers are there, KM is feeling that it's not helping her bond with mom. Is that true?
Right.
So you said we would build in some additional time for KM with mom. Couldn't it be an alternative to visiting with the youngers and adding time for KM?
Definitely be willing to explore that further, yeah.
Because you'll for sure be sensitive to KM's schedule and sports and all that kind of stuff, right?
I will. I don't think they'll have a choice because KM is very into her wrestling and she's not going to give that up to go to parenting time.
Okay, this is a direct placement, correct?
Yes.
So does the department continue to not recommend placement based on some of the shortcomings of the placement?
Our recommendation remains the same. There have been some progress in that area. Mr. Avalos did complete Families First, which was able to help him significantly. A laptop was purchased to help him with like online applications. We also ended up, the department paid some back rent to help keep them afloat. Services from Families First are now in place, and then Mr. Avalos is willing to, there's a secondary program that was recommended called FTBS, and he has agreed to complete that as well.
In the court report, it says he's behind in his house payment. Has that been fixed now?
I apologize, that was just rectified today.
Okay. And he has participated in everything needed by the agency to get some of those services for the children, correct?
Yes, and I do see him where before we had some missed appointments and where he would forget. I am seeing where he is, they might forget, but they're immediately getting rescheduled. It's not like someone has to intervene, like he's recognizing it. He's also been more upfront about when transportation is needed instead of kind of waiting to the last minute. So I think overall communication has gotten better for both of us.
Have you seen the divorce complaint that's been filed?
I have not seen the full complaint, no.
Will you support the placement if there are any resources in getting representation in the divorce?
We don't, department doesn't usually, I will be there to support the entire family and whatever recommendation is best at that time.
Last line of questioning is this: what do you expect the communication to be like between the placement and the mother?
Limited. I think the households need to be separate unless it is specifically regarding the children that can't go through the department, which I cannot think of a situation right now that would happen, but I think it should be child-based, such as maybe communicating about appointments, communicating if maybe one is grounded, whether on parenting time or something like that, but it really should be exclusive to the kids and however they choose to proceed with their divorce.
Okay, thank you, nothing further.
I have some questions. I see that Ms. Varga Avalos is seeing Kelsey Perez.
Yes.
She is seeing someone at ACPC.
Yes.
You shared with us that her psychiatric care is through CMH.
Her medications are through CMH. Catherine Krabs is only addressing the domestic violence, and the schizophrenia is being addressed by ACPC.
What's being addressed by ACPC?
Her schizophrenia. That's her primary mental health diagnosis, is schizophrenia.
And how do we know that?
That is what was reported when it was given to me to the case. It also was alluded to in the alienation assessment that it was consistent with that. I believe that diagnosis came from her last hospitalization.
Do you have access to any of the CMH records or providers?
Not at this time, but I'm more than happy to get those.
Have you asked for a release to look at those?
Mom has signed releases for me.
Okay. The treatment provider, Kelsey Perez, indicates she's looking at feelings of depression and making better choices while angry, managing anxiety and anxiety symptoms. So does Kelsey Perez have any idea what the diagnoses are or any of the other things that are happening with Ms. Varga Avalos's care?
In my last conversation, she did, but not directly. My understanding is that she was getting that information from Ms. Varga Avalos herself, so not directly from the source, no.
Okay, because her therapeutic treatment goals are great, but they don't seem confined simply to the dynamics of domestic violence. So I would like some clarification on that if possible. I'm also concerned that these providers are, I mean, we need to, number one, we have to confirm that's a diagnosis, the schizophrenia is a diagnosis, and if there's medication recommended for that, whether or not she's taking it, whether or not she's attending those medication reviews through CMH, that's extraordinarily important for somebody with a diagnosis like that. ACPC just says that she's a patient and has attended weekly appointments. So I'm gonna make you a homework list, sorry. But I would like to know what specifically they think they're treating, in addition to whether or not they think that they're making progress on the treatment goals. I've looked at the forensic fluids test report, and I'm concerned, obviously, that she's testing positive for THC and opiates, especially in light of the fact that she may be on medications for schizophrenia. That could cause very serious complications, potentially. So we need to know what she's taking from CMH, if she's taking that. There's no indication on the drug test reports that she's tested positive for anything that she may be supposed to be taking. So
I thought the med list was in that packet.
not that I've seen,
My apologies then.
because that would come from CMH.
I do have her med list from CMH, so I was able to verify the medication. I apologize, I thought I put it in the report, but I was able to confirm with CMH, especially, I'm gonna say it wrong, Invega. That's what's supposedly treating the schizophrenia, but I will get more clarification for you, Your Honor.
All right, and find out who is doing her medication reviews and whether or not they know that she has a prescription for opiates and that she's using THC. Because mixing THC with schizophrenia is a very bad idea. And I think that that's what you'll find when you contact her provider and talk with that person about what you found with your drug testing. And I would also ask you to continue drug testing her a little more often to see what's happening in her system. And just connect these service providers better, because I'm very concerned about what's coming out over here, and that's contradicting what's happening over here with this provider, and she's taking this, but she's testing positive for that. Those are very concerning. And I can appreciate that she's talking to all these providers. I mean, it seems to be good. But those are my concerns. Would you be able to look into those in the next report period?
Yes, ma'am.
And I would also, as part of that, frankly, expect you, and I can put it in the court order if you need me to share these documents amongst her service providers. You might even consider literally asking them to come together for a meeting to discuss the case, if you can convince them to do that, because you have so many different things happening with different service providers that I have a feeling they're not all understanding the full picture, like perhaps, and I don't even know if we have the full picture, right?
Yeah.
So That's what I would ask of you to do in our next report period. See if you can get that full picture and then make sure that all of our service providers are on the same page, that that's the best way for her to be moving forward. Okay. Questions based on my questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
The court has asked you about a series of medical health care providers for the mother, right?
Yes.
Is there anything in those reports that indicates that she accepts responsibility for the estrangement between my client and his daughters?
Well, no, there isn't, because the alienation assessment noted that he wasn't alienated, and mother maintains that she did not alienate the children from him.
What?
I apologize. Please rephrase your question.
Slow down too a little bit, please.
Sorry.
She takes the position she has not alienated the children from her father, their father, is that correct?
Yes, and the alienation assessment supports that.
Do you believe that the fraud committed through the Ohio courts has any relevance to this opinion that you just expressed?
I think that her changing the names is a further indication of alienation.
Right.
No, I believe that she believed that the girls wanted the name changed, and so that's why she did it.
To the extent she would commit fraud to do it?
I don't know if that's alienation necessarily.
Well, let me ask you, do you think she's alienated his daughters from my client?
I don't.
Nothing further.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, just two.
Go ahead.
You just indicated today you just paid off a house payment for the placement. How much did you pay?
Approximately $3,100.
Okay. At this meeting Thursday, might you discuss, I know we have Christmas and the holidays coming up, but maybe some extra visits might look like, or exchange of presents or whatever for mom and the kids?
That is the hope. The main part of that when we initially scheduled at FPM was to discuss expanding mountain visitation. So although, yes, we have some other things that have been added that we'll address, the main purpose of that meeting is to address the parenting time expansion.
That's all I have.
Thank you for your testimony. You may return to your seat.
Thank you.
Any other witnesses, Ms. Thomas?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. McFarland?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Brooks?
I'd like to start with Mrs. Avalos.
And Ms. Avalos, come on up to our witness stand.
I will be very brief.
Raise your hand. You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Just that.
Don't get excited, guys. This isn't the start.
Ma'am, do you believe you've unreasonably interfered with my client's right to visit his girls?
Your Honor, I'm objecting. The time frame is from disposition to this review. So if it's within that period, I'm fine by that. But if we're looking prior to that, my client's already made admissions and she's been ordered into a gay service plan. So it's outside the scope of this hearing.
Response?
He's right. I have no further questions.
All right. Any questions for your client? Mr. McFarland?
No.
Ms. Thomas?
I have none.
Ms. Heiss?
No questions, thank you.
All right, thank you. You may return to your seat.
Mr. Miller,
Mr. Miller, come on up to our witness stand.
I told you we'd be brief.
Stephanie.
Now it gets better.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God, this.
Let's just go.
Sir, at your last hearing, you were awarded the right to have parenting time with your daughters, right?
Yes, sir.
Have you in fact had any parenting time with your daughters?
With
That's the 15-year-old?
the youngest. 30, yeah.
Can we just use initials, please?
Yes, please.
KM. You recognize who KM is?
Yes.
All right. How many times have you visited with KM?
I visited with her 3 times.
How about the older child?
Nothing. She did no visitation with her.
It's been explained to you that she personally does not want the visitation, right?
Correct. Yes.
She's how old?
She is 15.
Now, we have not yet begun therapeutic visitations. You understand that?
Yes.
What have the visitations been like with KM?
The first 2 visits went good. I have no idea what Eva would elaborate on that. Eva knew that I was bringing my
I had to mute this part. It was
and
full
she
of.
has every right to ask me any questions. But some questions are left to be therapeutic for the therapist. Ava would more or less tell questions you want to ask him.
Who's Ava?
Or Mrs. Copus. Don't you have one questions you want to ask your dad? He has every right to ask me anything, and I'll tell her the truth. She spoke about, was I up on a roof? Those would have to be in therapeutic. Ava made no attempt to try to intervene, but in other ways she would intervene to get her to ask me more questions. That wasn't right. The visit was for me to spend to connect with her sister. That never happened. And for the life of me, I don't understand why Ava has it out for me.
I would like you to refer to her as Mrs. Copus.
Mrs. Copus, I apologize.
Continue.
So she spoke with Dr. Hygen for a psyche bill. It was explained to me that he's going to reach out to me. He never once reached out to me. So I had no idea when it was going to take place. Through the emails, I'm sure everybody read it. And I have no problem with taking the psyche bill.
Did you?
Not yet.
Schedule?
I have no idea. His office never reached out to me. He never reached out to me.
You've had some problems with communication between you and the governmental agencies, right?
Yes.
Look, tell the court what problems you're having.
Today, I was unaware of this appointment because it was explained to me that I had received paperwork through the mail. Nothing has come through the mail regarding this court date.
How about via computer, emails?
Yes.
Text messages?
Juveniles, I don't know how you. The text message would come across and it would go into my junk mail. And I don't read my junk mail.
I think.
And there was visitation through Mrs. Moore, I believe. And when she had reached out to me, this was her attitude. When she had reached out to me, she goes, "I'm returning your call." Well, first of all, I never had called her. It was her that was supposed to set up an appointment with me. It never took place. She goes, "Are you?"
Initials, please.
I am and CM.
Continue.
She had already had a little bit of attitude for no reason. I was waiting for her to reach out, set up an appointment so I can attend this therapeutic visitation.
Why were you waiting instead of taking the initiative yourself?
Because I didn't have her number or her office.
Have you ever received a timely notification of any therapeutic session of any kind? Or these court hearings for that matter?
No.
You're willing to give the court and the workers your proper email address after the hearing?
Yes, I've done that. I don't know how many times with the court or with whoever. Everybody, my address has been on file for years.
Getting back to these meetings between you and KM, your 15-year-old. What was the participation between you, your daughter, and Mrs. Kopus?
The first two I thought went rather well as she's, because I communicated with her through text messages. The third one did not end well. Mrs. Kopus knows that this needs to be therapeutic. These line of questions that KM has to ask.
What kind of questions were asked of you?
And for me to explain in that setting wasn't a right idea, or it wasn't the right time.
As in, who is this girl, or who is this young woman? Is that the kind of question you were asked?
No, she was asking, there is a letter sent from my oldest daughter, Brianna. She does not like me because the reason she does not like me or want a relationship with me is because her boyfriend beat her up and left her bloody and bruised. And so when I try
I don't want to get too far.
Right, get away from it.
Give me some idea of the type of questions that the KM asked you.
KM asked me at the last visit, she says that her stepdad tried fighting me several times, that I cowered away, and that KM said that I had held Chloe in my arms, that he came and rescued Chloe and took her out of my arms. Nothing's gonna get solved unless Mrs. Varga and Mr. Avalos just stop, let the therapy handle it. Or whether it's with Mrs. Kopus. I'm a stranger to them. They have questions, I'm here to answer them. But some questions have to be in a therapeutic setting with a therapist. That's what I said from day one.
Your daughter asked questions about an incident where she was forcibly removed from your arms?
Yeah, she had told me what her stepdad had told her.
I understand. Did she state to you where she had heard about this alleged suicide attempt?
No, she read it off some email. I don't know where she received it from.
Maybe it was a step parent, maybe it was the biological, maybe it was somewhere else.
Correct.
Were there any other questions of a disturbing nature like those two?
No, the way the last visit was going towards my daughter, Brittany, who came to see her sister, Eva was aware of it. She got upset because it was brought up about my oldest daughter, Brianna. Brianna and Brittany don't get along because Brianna used to bully Brittany. And it brought up memories of when she was a childhood. And I told Ava, I said, this needs to be in a therapeutic. You can't.
Mrs. Kopus?
Mrs. Kopus.
It's for my benefit. I can't keep first names and last names.
Right. Mrs. Kopus. It's like it went one ear out the other. It was more like she was telling her, is there more questions you want to ask? So, no.
When she said made those statements, was she getting into areas, in your opinion, that were appropriate for a non-therapeutic setting?
No, the question she was asking me needs to be in front of a therapist. And Mrs. Kopus knew that. And she just allowed it to happen. I never got up and banged the desk, or I never said, hey, you wait till you're 18 to come see. No, it didn't happen that way as she described it. She asked me questions one after another. I had my other daughter here. It was supposed to be a good visit. It didn't end up that way.
Would you say it was more like an interrogation from your child?
Yes. I'm not going to get a fair chance if Mrs. Avalos or Mr. Avalos is negatively talking bad about me. She answered the question, did Mrs. Avalos keep my daughters away from me? She believes it never happened. I brought emails.
Who asked that question?
You had asked Mrs. Copus if she felt that Mrs. Avalos kept my 2 daughters from me. She said no.
Right.
Mrs. Copus never asked to speak to anybody that I know or the witnesses that I had that came to court to prove that she had kept my daughters from me. She's seen all the emails.
Sorry, I had to mute that part. I had to. It's fine. It's just him ranting, blaming everybody else in the world except for him.
Me, this isn't my fault. Mrs. Avalos has to stop talking negative. So, Mr. Avalos, how am I going to get a fair shake? Mrs. Avalos kept me from my daughters. It's nothing new. I'm here. I've been here for every court visit. Why am I here? So it's mind-boggling. So I found a therapist, and the doctor's going to give me a psyche bill. I want a neutral psyche bill from Dr. Hodgin, whoever he is. I know he works with the courts. So there has to be neutral. Dr. Parks, it's bewildering. It's like you have to get one that works with the courts. Okay, fine. Then somebody neutral who doesn't know either party. Let me take the same test. I just won't. I don't.
Well, we have to be careful here because court and the department uses certain people. You
Right.
understand? And these services are provided to you without cost, aren't they?
Yes, but
So
initially
that
they're
if
going
you
to.
want to get an expert of your own,
Not so much expert of my own. These people tend to favor the courts, if you will, like Mr. Parks. When I was there for parent alienation test, he gave me a psych test right in his office. I said, "What are you doing?" I said, he goes, "Yeah." I said, "But I'm not here for this. I was lied to." And how did he make any assumption about me within 20 minutes even talking with me? The rest of the time was spent taking that psych test that he administered. So it seems like to me they don't want me to be a part of my daughter's life. So yeah, am I tired? Mentally, physically tired? Yes. Are my 2 daughters suffering? They have questions. They have a right to know who I am. I'm fighting not only with these ladies. No problem. Whatever they want to ask me, there's a therapist there.
in a therapeutic setting.
Correct.
I have nothing further.
Cross-examination,
No,
I have none, Your Honor.
Ms. Heiss.
No, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. May you return to your seat.
Thank you, Judge.
I have no further witnesses.
Ms. Heiss,
I have no witnesses today. Thank you.
comments.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think that we're fairly early on in the case service plans for both parents, obviously for Mr. Miller specifically. I believe that Ms. Copus is very aware of the dynamics of this family, is doing well in the case management component of it. We would request that the parenting time order from our order of disposition for Mr. Miller be amended to reflect the therapeutic parenting time, with a reminder that the connection between Ms. Moore and him needs to happen in order to get that scheduled. We can only do so much. And then we would ask that parenting time continue to be supervised with Ms. Varga Avalos for the time being. We can, in the middle of this review period, if it's necessary, do a stipulation order amongst the attorneys to get that parenting time unsupervised. But given that it is typically our default, I would just ask that it continue to be supervised. And so we are ready to ask the court to make it unsupervised without further restrictions. And with that, we'd ask for another 90-day review. Thank you.
Ms. McFarland.
well, Your Honor, I appreciate that we might be able to do this by stipulation, but may have some hostility between the parties, at least one towards my client. So I'm not sure that we might get a stipulated order. I hate to drag out perhaps supervision. So we would ask that the agency have the discretion to move it unsupervised. I have also noticed a personal change in my client's behavior since her change in regimen, her medication. And she fully welcomes having everybody come together to make sure that she's cooperating and she's taking the medications that she needs for her benefit, for the benefit of her kids, Your Honor. So I think the assessment of the workers that my client is progressing favorably, and that these important issues are going to be discussed at the family team meeting as far as releases that need to be signed, Christmas parenting time, and the other issues. I trust that we can address those as we have done. Thank you.
Mr. Brooks?
I agree with the attorney for the department that we're very early in this process. I think what we need is these therapeutic visits, to the extent the girls will allow them, between the girls and their father, so that we can see just how much progress can be made. Mr. McFarland's claim that his client is making progress, I think is unfounded. I think that's the most polite term I can use, or he wouldn't have used his skill and expertise in evidentiary hearings to have prevented me from asking her a very simple question. I think you helped estrange your daughters from their father. He didn't want her to have to answer that. It says a lot. I'll ask it on another set time at another place. It will get asked. But
This lawyer is just, you know what? I don't know who's worse, the lawyer or the father.
right now, I just think we need to get the therapeutic parenting time started so that it doesn't turn into a grilling spoon-fed from outside sources. I have an opinion what the sources are, but I can't prove it as we sit here today. But I think they're real enough. Thank you.
Ms. Heiss?
Thank you. I hope to use this time to fine tune Ms. Varga Avalos's treatment plan and to talk about her strengths and her progress. Although remembering that the professionals, the CTAC evaluation is saying that it is needed to sustain this for a long period of time. And I think that's exactly what KM and ZM are saying is, yeah, I need to see it for a while. And I think that's what the doctors are saying, but we have a definitive ruling on the fact that Ms. Vargas Avalos engaged in multiple actions that kept Mr. Miller from his children. We have that. We don't need to keep proving it. However, the professional continues to say Mr. Miller also became angry at her and stopped pursuing visitation through court orders. So we've addressed this. I think instead of spending time on fine tuning some things for the kids, I think we heard untruths from Mr. Miller. I think he's denying, he's not taking accountability. I think it's your fault that he doesn't have, the court's fault that he doesn't have notice of the next hearing. It comes in the order every time. I believe last time he left court early and it may not have gotten the piece of paper, but he's supposed to be getting these notices, these orders. Every date is in the order, but somehow it's somebody else's fault. It's Dr. Haugen's fault that he belongs to he's on the court, he's a service provider, so he worked for the state. As if the court has a predetermined outcome that we're trying to manipulate other than reunification. I think that he's demonstrating paranoia that Ms. Kopis is not making him aware of appointments, that he's bringing people to, he's had 3 visits so far, he's gotten mad in 1, he's brought a visitor to another, no accountability. We saw a lot of good information about his mental health and about his medications. I'm really eager for him to do the case service plan. As much as he's in tune with what needs to happen, and I don't know that anybody disagrees with him, that nobody should be disparaging him to his children. And it has to go on, and he has to do his services, both. I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. The court finds all interested parties were given notice for purposes of today's review hearing. The court announces the review hearings at every court hearing before the parties leave. There's also email that's sent out. If you have an issue with things going to your junk mail, then you need to fix that. That's not on us to do. And you've also had verbal confirmation of when your next court hearing is. So there has been adequate notice given for purposes of today's review hearing. And I trust the parties to manage responsibly their email correspondence. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Ms. Kopis on that point. She's available. She's also available for any questions regarding Ms. Brene Moore, regarding Dr. Haugen, or anything else. So the claim that there's insufficient information being offered here to Mr. Miller specifically, this court finds to be without merit, especially given the fact that Ms. Eva Kopis is very competently managing this case and is able to provide that information upon a request of any parent, whether that's by email, text message, or carrier pigeon, if you will. Perhaps the department could look into that last option another time. As it relates to progress on services, both of these children, the two that Mr. Miller is concerned with specifically, are in therapy. They're in therapy with Ms. Brene Moore, who is supposed to be the person who overseeing some therapeutic reintroduction parenting time. I reviewed Dr. Parks's analysis last time to indicate that he did not express any specific indication of risk of harm associated with visitation. Unfortunately, I was wrong about that, because it appears that there was a pretty difficult visit recently that resulted in some unfortunate things that were said, both between child and parent. And that could have been avoided, frankly, if it would have been in the context of therapeutic reintroductory parenting time, which is what I have been asking Mr. Miller to engage in for several sessions of court up to this point. The referral's been made. He even had contact with Ms. Brene Moore, and unfortunately, for no legitimate reason, as far as from what I can see where I'm sitting, has not engaged in that service. To avoid any further harm to that relationship and to the child's mental health, the court will order that therapeutic parenting time with Brene Moore will be the only visitation that Mr. Miller is allowed until he accomplishes that goal and convinces Ms. Moore that he is not going to be a threat to the mental health of his children. These two children have been through enough. They are doing their own hard work in their own therapy, and they don't need any additional material to work on at this time. This is supposed to be a positive experience, and if there's difficult questions that come up, then so be it. You have to be the adult in the room, Mr. Miller. You can't lose it, just like we don't like Ms. Stephanie Avalos losing it, if you will. That's part of what Dr. Parks has explored. There's a long history here, especially with your older daughter, that she's basically become immune to much of the upheaval and chaos that has characterized her life thus far, that was reflected again in the CTAC recommendation. So we need to break that pattern, period. And you have to be part of that. You both can be part of that, or you can get out of the way, frankly, because I'm not going to sit here and listen to you shifting blame to other people about why you didn't go to your psychological, why we didn't go to see Ms. Brene Moore, why we didn't. So that's unfortunate, but if that's
just one thing that bothered me here, not that the father left, but there's car keys sitting right there on the table, and I couldn't tell from the beginning of the video. I rewound it. Are they the attorneys or are they his? I think they're his. I think he left his car keys right there.
Your perspective, Mr. Miller, then it's better, frankly, that we understand that now, and we can move towards a goal of permanency that will better support these children, rather than waiting to see that fall off the radar later on. So the two children are placed with Mr. Avalos. He is the safest and least restrictive under the circumstances. I have articulated clearly in my questioning to Ms. Kopis my concerns about what's happening with Ms. Stephanie Avalos and her multiple different prescriptions and service providers. That frankly is also supported by the characterization that Dr. Parks illustrated in his questioning of ZM, specifically around page 12, that we could expect to see from her mother, her effectively putting on her best face, if you will, at times. And there's a lot of issues there between her and this child, including a potential credit card that she found in her name and her mother's wallet, for example. There's a lot to unpack here, and a lot of progress and significant stability that we're going to need to see from Ms. Stephanie Avalos before I'm ready to move, frankly, even to unsupervised parenting time. We have at this juncture one child refusing to see her, working hard again on her own therapy to get there, and some good experiences, I think, in part, and engagement in services, which is great to see. But I want to make sure that this isn't just putting on a good face. We need to see sustained employment, access to transportation, sustained treatment, know what we're treating for, whether or not she's engaged with CMH, whether or not her service providers are all on the same page. And so there will be, in addition to today's court order outlining many of those concerns, so that Ms. Kopis can track down those answers for us before the next review hearing. But in the meantime, the children will remain placed with Mr. Guy Avalos. And I want to say that I'm grateful for the department in battening down the hatches on that and trying to support him as best you can. This is the person the children trust at this point, which goes a lot, which goes very far, especially with ZM and KM being very vocal about what they want, need, and where they've come from. So thank you for your support of Mr. Avalos. Please continue to do that and engage with him. And of course, if you need me to encourage him to engage with you, you know where to find me. So they will remain placed in that particular home pending further proceedings with their siblings who are also undertaking services and doing well in that particular home. I would look forward to any updates on other cases that do concern all four of these children, and to look at those permanency goals, considering the long history of this case, Mr. Miller's initial actions and missing some of those opportunities. I think we need to have a permanency planning hearing at our next review, which will of course take into account the children's preferences. I trust our providers to look into that as well. And let's give you your next review. You're going to find Ms. Kopis also in this attachment that I've asked you to look at the curriculum that was recommended in the trauma assessment and provide that potentially to Mr. Avalos, Guy Avalos, as well as asking you to either review with him or connect him with the trauma assessor to review the trauma assessments that he participated in with the two girls, so that he is best able to take advantage of that information. So you'll see that asking you to connect him with those two resources as well in our next report period. For purposes of scheduling our review, until March 12th. Obviously, we have a holiday in there.
Patrick's.
That one too.
That's not a holiday.
She's here.
How about Tuesday, March 12th?
She stopped it there. She said, "How about Tuesday, March 12th?" And then that was it. That was it. That was the end of the stream. So, so I don't know if I read between the lines with the judge at the end. Okay, first, in summary, she wants permanency. She wants a permanency hearing coming up. She's done with both parents. She's not happy with either of them. They both have lots of issues, and puts the kids through a lot. And I mean, they were saying how great the mom was doing. The mom's not doing great. They found a credit card taken out in her daughter's name in her wallet. Come on. Yeah, so she's looking to end the court part of it, and then she's gonna give the kids to the person who has them now and who's had them for a long time. So, from what I understand, is Mr. Miller was married to Mrs. Miller. They had two babies, and then Mrs. Miller got married to the person who has the kids right now, and they had more children. So, the two children that are Mr. Miller's, are brother and sister with the other kids, and they all live with that father right now, and they think of him as the father. And this guy, this Mr. Miller, he's never going to get anywhere blaming everybody for everything. And his lawyer is not helping him. His lawyer is making everything worse for him because he's feeding into these conspiracy theories instead of saying, look, you got to get this done to get your kids. Stop worrying about your ex-wife. She basically has, nothing to do with him taking the steps that he needs to get his own kids. Yes, she can be doing bad things in the background. Completely true. But he's more worried about that than him doing what he needs to do. At least she's faking it. She's doing some things to get her kids back, but I don't think really a lot. I just don't. And I don't think she's doing it well. And I think she's still doing drugs. And I think she's doing bad stuff. And the 15-year-old who doesn't see who doesn't want to see either of them, good for her. And I know that's a horrible thing to say. People always say, oh, but it's your mom. Oh, but it's your dad. No. I mean, I was in that situation where my ex-husband, I would pay him to see the kids. And then he wouldn't show up half the time, and they would be brokenhearted. And after a while, I said, that's it. You're not going to do this to them anymore. And I cut off all contact. Now, they were teenagers. They weren't little kids. And they had their own. They could have easily just gone and seen them. If you ever try to control a teenager, you know that you can't. You just can't. But I told him no more. That's it. It's over. And he was like, okay, bye. And he was gone. And this guy will be gone too. He's just angry at everybody. But I thought the judge, when she started firing back at him, I thought that was great. I was cheering her on because the blonde-haired lady tried a little bit, but she didn't really take it as far as the judge did. So that judge is great. I love this judge. This lawyer I can't stand. He's the one. I had a video not too long ago. He got up and he complained because there was a 7-page motion or brief, and he had to read 7 pages. And he called it War and Peace because it was just too long for him to read. He's horrible. I just think he's horrible. I just think he's doing worse than good in this case. But that's fine because I don't think the father needs any help. But that's just my opinion, I'm a bitter old woman. So, well, guys, sorry about the audio issues at the beginning. Just, I'm going to try to cut that out. I want to see if my skills will let me go back into the video and cut out the first X amount of minutes. Well, I'm going to get more good stuff for the daytime. These are nighttime cases, so I don't put them on in the daytime. It's just for us night owls. It's 1:30 a.m. here. So I'm not going to say go to bed. You don't have to go to bed yet. We still have a good hour and a half until it's starting to be like you need to go to sleep. So stay up for another hour and a half and, I don't know, do something. Do the dishes. Thanks for coming out. Always thank you so much. And I will see you next time.